We all know Jack Daniel's for Old No. 7, their sour mash bourbon, but Jack Daniel's has also been making a Tennessee straight rye whiskey. So let's have a taste and see how this differs to a traditional rye. Hey there, I'm Nath Martin, the Whisky Scribe. Taste is subjective, whiskey is diverse, and this channel is all about helping you understand it well enough to enjoy it on your own terms. So let's just get straight into it. So today I've got the Jack Daniel's Tennessee Straight Rye Whiskey. Now I can't be certain, but I actually think Jack Daniel's may have been the first whiskey I ever actually tasted. Back in the day when I was 18 and drinking bourbon and Coke, before I really started delving into Scotch and single malts. And I have to admit, I haven't really touched Jack Daniel's much since because it kind of almost feels like going back to a disastrous ex. I'm sure she's great now, but I was 18, I did some stupid things in that relationship. But I know that Jack Daniel's has been doing a lot of experimentation lately. They've been going into single malts and things like that, as well as some rye whiskeys. So I've been wanting to try them for a while, and I popped into the shops to grab a bottle of Wild Turkey rye, just for some cocktail videos I was doing before Christmas. And the Jack Daniel's rye was cheaper. It was marked down. Normally this is about $15, $20 more than the Wild Turkey rye, so it just seemed like a good opportunity. So that's what I've got here today. So the Jack Daniel's Tennessee Straight Rye Whiskey is considered high rye. So it's got a mash bill of 70% rye, 18% corn, and 12% barley. It's bottled at 45% ABV and reportedly made from whiskies up to about 5 years of age. Now in Australia, it retails around about $85. As far as I can tell in the US, it seems to retail around about the $50, $60 US mark. I'm not sure, you've got a lot of different states and a lot of different pricing. So if you're in the US, let me know where this sits on your shelves. But from what I can tell, it's considered entry level on the US market. In Australia, it's a little bit of a step up above what we call entry level rye whiskey. Now the thing about this being a Tennessee rye rather than a traditional rye, it's gone through the Lincoln County process. That means the spirit was filtered through sugar maple charcoal before barreling, which is the same thing that Jack Daniel's Old No. 7 goes through, and it's meant to give it more of like a mellow, smooth flavor. And reportedly, this doesn't taste as much like a traditional rye. It actually tastes closer to a Tennessee whiskey. And when I drink American bourbons and things like that, I usually lean more towards the high rye content. So I don't know how this is going to sit for me. Yeah, I actually haven't tasted it neat yet, so I might as well just dive in. So in terms of color, this thing sort of comes across sort of amber, a bit of a copper sort of note to it. It does seem to be kind of an oily whiskey, sort of medium thickness legs coming down the glass, which that always makes me happy. On the nose, I am getting sort of more of like a mellow corn bourbon sort of sweetness there. I'm not getting that sort of slight spicy note that I usually tend to get from a rye whiskey. Yeah, the nose is quite interesting. If you didn't tell me it was a rye whiskey, I probably would have assumed it was a bourbon. That sweetness is kind of, it's mellow, you get a little bit of that vanilla, yeah, a bit of that vanilla sort of wood note coming through. There's some fruity sort of notes in there, and it's kind of like some sort of preserved, yeah, some sort of jammy, like berry sort of reserve. So I'm thinking like a little bit of that artificial cherry sort of sweetness happening. Yeah, so I think there's this artificial cherry sort of note, almost like the syrup that you've got in a jar full of cherries. There's a little bit of this mushy banana sort of aroma on the nose. Kind of not so much like the banana, it's more like the smell of the peel once you've taken it off the banana. But yeah, I'm just not getting that level of spice that I often get from a rye whiskey. So we'll find out what happens when I go in. Okay, I am picking up the rye note in there, But again, it comes across more like a bourbon with a high rye content rather than something that's got a 70% rye mash bill, which is actually kind of fine. I wouldn't put it in the same classification as a rye whiskey, but it's still quite nice. That mellowness makes it really, really palatable, probably especially for somebody who doesn't necessarily like the spiciness of a rye whiskey. There's a little, like a faint little note of mint going on in there. That banana note from the nose does carry across a little bit. There's more vanilla. And yeah, there's a little bit more of that sort of cherry kind of sweetness happening. In terms of the finish, it's not long. So all those flavor notes that are in there, they're not especially complex. They're all in there and they're all sort of just sitting beside each other. I wouldn't say it's like an especially balanced whiskey. I would think the purpose of this whiskey is to be your rye mixer. So if you're going to have, you know, your rye old fashioned or cocktails or anything using rye whiskey, except it doesn't drink like a rye whiskey. It drinks more like a bourbon with a slightly higher rye content. So I think based on the price point, if you're in the US, this is probably a great, I wouldn't say alternative to a rye whiskey. I would say it's there for if you like bourbon with a high rye content, you would go with something like this. It's worth exploring because it's interesting how much of that Jack Daniels-esque sort of flavor comes across in there. But yeah, to me, this is kind of more like Jack Daniels Old No. 7 if they just upped the rye content. Which is fine if that's what you like, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's the sort of whiskey that I would regularly have in a Glencairn to drink neat. It's something that I would throw into a cocktail. If this kind of breakdown is helpful, this is the sort of thing I do each week, so hit the subscribe button so you catch the next video. But comparing my tasting notes to the sort of things that have been put out there by Jack Daniels and other reviewers and things, they're saying that on the nose you get lots of banana candy notes, as well as cherry, marshmallow, and soft notes of nutmeg, vanilla custard. Banana, I'll say yes, but nowhere near as much as that review's letting on. Definitely cherry. Marshmallow sweetness is probably a good way to describe that. Now that I think of it, yeah, I would call that a marshmallow sort of sweetness. Soft notes of nutmeg, I didn't really get that. Like I said, it doesn't have a lot of that rye spiciness. On the palate, it's meant to be surprisingly mellow compared to the Old No. 7, yes. Gingerbread, honey, and banana mush. Honey, banana, yes. No to the gingerbread. To me, gingerbread is meant to have a little bit of like a spicy kick to it. I don't get a spicy kick on this. Like I said, it doesn't taste like a rye whiskey. It tastes like a bourbon with slightly higher rye content. And then they say orange liqueur and subtle spices on the finish. I would say there's a little bit of like an orangey sort of note hanging around there, but it's kind of a short to medium finish. So like I said, it's not really, if you're going to drink this as a sipping whiskey, it's a session whiskey where you're not paying too much attention to it. You just want a little bit of that rye note in the background. Not to say I don't like it, just at $85 in Australia, I would expect probably at least a little bit more. But when it comes to Jack Daniels, I'm probably more interested in trying some of their bonded single malts that they've been releasing. I haven't actually had a chance to get my hands on them just yet, but I've heard really, really good things. I hadn't heard anything about this until I saw it in the store. So if you've tried the bonded single malts from Jack Daniels, let me know in the comments. You know, are there any particular ones that I should hunt down? If there's a rye whiskey that you would recommend over this one, also let me know. But otherwise, enjoy what's in your glass and slange. So let's have a taste, talk about how it's different, and see what we find. Special kid, aren't you, Nate?